So thrilled that Hi folks, I'm so thrilled that you are all here today. As Alicia mentioned, my name is Kristen Litzelman. I'm talking today about the art of caregiving, and I'll get into what that means exactly in just a moment here. First, I want to make sure that you know who's talking at you in the moment. So, hello, my name is Kristen. I am faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm also an extension specialist. So I work with Alicia and a lot of the other extension educators throughout the state on issues around older adults, lifespan, and in particular, family caregiving. And that's really where my expertise lies. I do research on family caregiving. I do outreach, trying to help family caregivers know more about what resources are available to them and what we know from the research world, help make that available to families. And I'm interested in understanding what happens when families face a health crisis so that we can help families through that, because that can be a really, really hard time. Today, again, we're going to be talking about the art of caregiving. So there's a few different things that I'm hoping that you'll get out of this session. The first one is I always like to start with a little bit of Caregiving 101. You might already know all of these things, which is great. And I hope that even if you do know these things, you come away with something new or a new perspective, but you also might not. So we're just going to start a little bit about defining caregiving and care tasks to help make sure we're all on the same page with what we mean about that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how art and creative expression can support family caregivers. And we're going to end with a description of a public research project that I'm working on right now with the goals of helping to raise awareness and inspire conversations about caregivers' experiences. So I want to share that project with you, one, because I think it's interesting and something that's exciting, and also because we're currently doing that work. And there's an opportunity for you or other people in your life who are caregivers to participate and be part of that project. So I'm hoping to share that with you and send you away thinking a little bit more about the way that art and creative expression can help all of us and can help caregivers. So again, we're starting with Caregiving 101. Let's get on the same page about this. So when I talk about caregiving, I'm really talking about providing care or help to a family member or friend with a health issue or a disability. So this can be anyone across the entire life spectrum. Sometimes it is people caring for an aging parent. Sometimes it's people caring for a spouse. Sometimes it's people helping the next door neighbor. There's different degrees to which people provide that care. So sometimes it's really intensive. Sometimes it's nearly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week care. Sometimes it's just an hour here and there helping out with little things. All of that fits under my umbrella of caregiving. And the experience of caregivers is going to differ a lot based on a lot of those different pieces about who they are and what their context is. When we look at this in the big picture and we ask people across Wisconsin if they are a caregiver, if they've been a caregiver in the last month, 1 in 5 Wisconsinites, 19%, say that they are currently caregivers right now. And in the next year, 13% of Wisconsinites expect to become caregivers. So they look forward into the future and they say, I'm not a caregiver right now, but I'm pretty sure that sometime in the next 2 years or the next year, I am going to be a caregiver. I'm going to be one of the people helping to care for someone in my life who either has an illness or disability now, or I think maybe will in the future and will need my help. When we map that onto the state, this is what it looks like. We've got those red caregivers, which are the ones who are currently caregivers. We've got the yellow group, which are the people who think they will become caregivers. And then we've got the other folks in the state who aren't in that role yet, but might be in that role soon, or might be in that role in the future, or maybe are in the spot of receiving that care. When we look at this nationally, we know that there are 53 million caregivers here in the United States. And some of those caregivers feel like they had a choice. Like they said, yep, I'm going to take on this role. I can do this and I want to do this and I have a choice to do this. But the other chunk of caregivers, around 53%, didn't feel like they had a choice. It was something that they just had to take on because it was part of their responsibility. It was part of their duty. It wasn't something they could say yes or no to. It was just something that was theirs to hold. There's another survey that's been done more recently from RAND, which is a survey organization and think tank organization. And they made an estimate that there are actually more caregivers than that. Their estimate was that there are 106 million caregivers in the United States. Now, that's different only because they asked the questions about capturing caregiving differently. They were able to get more low intensity caregivers into that number. So the people who are just helping a neighbor now and then, they're captured in that number, whereas the 53 million is really more intensive caregiving. But no matter how you slice it, that's a lot of people. It's a lot of people who are in these care roles. And realistically, we can assume that everyone will be impacted by caregiving at some point. So this is a quote from Rosalind Carter, former First Lady, who said there are only four kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And sometimes we fit into more than one of those categories. Sometimes we're a caregiver and we need a caregiver, possibly at the same time and possibly at different times in our lives. It's so common. We really expect everyone to be impacted by this at some point. It can be challenging though, because we sometimes don't see caregiving in ourselves. And there's a few different reasons for this. Care roles have a tendency to sneak up on us. So it feels just like a normal part of our regular relationships where we are helping someone that we love and that we care about. And it's just normal until all of a sudden it isn't, until all of a sudden we're overwhelmed and we have sort of slid into an intensity of caregiving that maybe we didn't expect and we didn't see coming because it was just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. On the flip side, sometimes the care role sneaks up on us because it comes up suddenly and surprises us. And this is when maybe a loved one has a sudden health crisis, and we go from what we consider our normal everyday life to all of a sudden being thrown into this really dramatic care role that we maybe didn't expect. So both of those things are true in different scenarios. Sometimes it sneaks up on us in a slow sliding into care way, and sometimes it sneaks up on us and jumps out and surprises us really suddenly. Um, and the reason that I like to talk about this is because understanding care rules now can help us navigate them later. So I think this is important because if we don't see these care rules in ourselves, it can make it harder for us to adapt. It can make it harder for us to cope, and it can make it so that we don't realize the role that we're in until we're burnt out. So talking about it now, even if it's just that, oh, I'm spending an hour a week helping my neighbor, having that awareness that that is a care role can help set the stage for making sure that we are able to take care of ourselves so that we can continue taking care of all the roles that we have in our lives and also continue helping the people that we care about. So when we think about caregiving, we have a tendency to have a sort of schema in our brain, a sort of vision of here's what caregiving is. And what that vision is differs a lot, usually based on people's own experiences with caregiving or observations of caregiving in their lives. So sometimes, like I said earlier, it is that vision of someone who's caring for an aging parent. When we think of caregiving, sometimes that's what we think of. For other people, it is someone caring for a spouse. For other people, it's someone caring for a child that has a disability and is going to need lifelong care. Regardless of how we slice it, no matter what our sort of go-to image is of caregiving, we know that caregiving impacts a wide range of people. It impacts people across the life course. We have kids who are helping with care tasks. We have people who are the oldest of older adults who are helping with care tasks. And the care recipients are across the life course and across situations too. So keeping in mind that caregiving doesn't look like one particular thing can really help us wrap our heads around what it looks like. So when we think about care tasks, there's a lot of different things that these look like. And I like to name these because it can help people see caregiving in themselves that maybe they would otherwise overlook. So sometimes it means sitting in on health appointments, going and being the extra eyes and ears for someone who is getting medical care and being the one taking notes or being the one coordinating that care. Sometimes it looks like helping with housework or chores. Sometimes it's picking up groceries or bringing a meal. Sometimes it's driving. There's a lot of transportation that comes with health conditions. And when people can't drive themselves for whatever reason, or they need someone to help them with that transportation, there can be a lot of driving. So maybe that's 2 appointments, maybe that's errands, but driving a loved one, that counts as a care task. Sometimes it is helping with personal care tasks. This might be things like showering or eating. This is more of the intensive caregiving roles. A lot of us have care roles that don't include personal care tasks, but this is definitely one of the care tasks that people do and can be associated with more intensive roles. Managing finances for a loved one is a care task. Helping a loved one take care of themselves can be a care task. So encouraging them, did you take your meds today? Did you go on a walk? You're supposed to go on a walk. Did you do your physical therapy practices? All of that is care tasks because it's helping someone else do their own self-care. And providing emotional support, being the ear, being the person that someone can vent to about their own health issues, helping them sort through the way that the health issues are impacting their lives, that also counts as a care task. Another way to think about this is through the way that people report their own caregiving. So back in 2018, I know this was a while ago now, there was an awareness campaign throughout Wisconsin that was that asked what people would fill in for this prompt. You might be a caregiver if. And people submitted images with words that filled in that prompt. So here's just a few that I pulled that I think really highlight the way that caregiving impacts people. And I'll read through them because if anyone is on the road or not looking at the screen or needs that explanation, you'll be able to hear it too. So the first image is two people holding hands, and it says, you might be a caregiver if your date night is at the doctor's office. The second one is an older woman holding her glasses and looking at a computer screen, and it says, you might be a caregiver if you spend hours online learning about health issues. The next one is a bird feeder, and the text says, you might be a caregiver if the first thing you do in the morning is fill your neighbor's bird feeder. The next one is a picture of some prescription bottles, and it says, you might be a caregiver if you know more about current medications than current movies. The next one is a picture of a kitchen, and there's a woman in the kitchen and she's standing on the ceiling. So she is upside down, and the rest of the kitchen is around her just normal. And it says, you might be a caregiver if you become a waitress, nurse, chauffeur, and entertainer. The last one is a picture from the movie Office Space with the red stapler. And it says, you might be a caregiver if you do more paperwork than you ever did at a paid job. And so these really highlight these care tasks. It's everything from filling a neighbor's bird feeder to learning everything we possibly can about a particular health issue, or learning more about current medications, or being all of the things: waitress, nurse, chauffeur, and entertainer. And it can really be big stuff or little stuff. So the other point that I like to make is that caregiving comes with both joys and challenges. And often it comes with joys and challenges at the exact same time. So there was a survey done the Caregiving in the US 2020, where nationally caregivers were asked about what their experience is with caregiving. One of the questions was about getting a sense of purpose. Were you given a sense of purpose because of your caregiving? And when we asked that question, 51% of people, more than half, said, yes, caregiving gave me a sense of purpose. That's a joy, potentially. People often get other things out of caregiving. Sometimes it's a stronger relationship with their loved ones. Sometimes it is skills that they get from the caregiving role. Sometimes it's feeling a sense of purpose and self-efficacy, of knowing that they can do hard things and get hard things done. So there are good things that come with caregiving roles. There's also potentially stress that comes with caregiving roles. In this same survey, when people were asked if they had emotional stress, 36% said, yep, that's me. I've got high emotional stress. That also means that the rest of the people didn't say they had high emotional stress. So it can be a wide array of experiences, and people can say, yep, I'm really stressed, and yep, I have a sense of purpose at the same time. And so that's really important. And one of the things that I want to point out about this is that sometimes it's the big stuff that makes us feel a sense of purpose or makes us feel a sense of stress. Sometimes it's the really big things that weigh heavily on us. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the little stuff that can be the most frustrating. And there can be moments of joy that just come out of nowhere. And so keeping in mind that sometimes as a caregiver, the things that drives you crazy is something really big and heavy. And sometimes the thing that drives you crazy is the machine that keeps beeping and you can't turn it off, and it's driving you nuts and you don't feel a sense of control over that. All of those things can be true. So caregiving 101, we're all on the same page about that. Next, we're going to pivot into talking about art and creative expression a little bit. So what does art and creative expression do for us in general? And what does it do for caregivers in particular? So when I think about the way that caregiving influences us, there's a lot of coping strategies that people use that we know through science and just through lived experience can help. And this is just a few of those examples listed here. One thing that we know helps people is exercise. And sometimes I hesitate to say this because none of us needs to be told that we need to exercise more. We all know that. We all know it's helpful. It doesn't always help us actually do the thing. But when people exercise, it helps them cope with stressful situations. For me, in my own personal experience, a 10-minute walk would take my brain from being all swirly to being much more settled and able to problem solve and deal with the issues at hand. Socialization is getting social support. It's going for coffee with a friend. It is being around other people in a support group or other people who are having a similar lived experience as you, and just having that connection, that touch point of being with people and having the sense of connection that comes with that. Mindfulness can be things like meditation. It can also be things like looking out the window and noticing that there's an owl out there waiting for your attention. I mentioned that because earlier, before we started recording, I was talking about this wonderful time when I saw an owl in the tree outside my window and had to stop everything so I could go look at it. Being in the moment, it's being grounded, it's connecting yourself with the chair that's under you or the ground that's under your feet, and just having a moment to connect with your breath. All of those things are mindfulness, and that can really ground us and help keep us in the moment. I use this one in particular when I'm getting swirly thoughts and when it feels like everything is swirling out of control. I ground down. I connect myself to my seat or to the chair. I think about the way the breath is moving on in and out of my body. And that helps me settle. It helps me come back into the moment. And again, helps me figure out how to problem solve. Distraction, things like watching TV, reading a novel, playing a game on your phone or on the computer or a board game, stuff that gets us out of our own heads for a little bit. This can be particularly helpful when it's just too much. It's too much and we can't deal with it and we need to take a break. The thing about distraction is we always have to come back and deal with the thing later. But distraction can help us in that moment if it's just too much for us to take a break, have some distance, and then revisit in the future to deal with whatever the issues are. Faith practices can be really helpful, or spirituality practices more generally, whether that is going to church and being in a faith community, or whether that is prayer, or whether that is just taking a moment to connect with our spirituality. Positive self-talk or positive reframing is another one that I've highlighted here. That's things like literally telling ourselves we can do this, or taking something that we're seeing as a challenge and saying, okay, how can I find the positive in this? How can I find a way to make this work for me? This is not toxic positivity where we're like, rah, 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 we can do everything, because it's okay to have those negative emotions. But there is a chance to be like, okay, this is a really hard time. I can do this, and have that positive self-talk to help us get through those challenges. So that's just some coping strategies that I'm highlighting there. There are certainly others. And I think everyone benefits from taking a moment to think about what coping strategies work for them in a particular moment or in particular circumstances, and maybe think about which coping strategies they wish they had more of and they could amplify in order to have a wide array of coping strategies that we use. Because the more diversity we have in coping strategies, the more we have lots of different things that we can draw on, the better we're going to be able to handle challenges in our lives. So I talk about coping strategies because in part, I think that's what helps us be resilient. And I have a metaphor for resilience that I've been trying out that I think is useful. Sometimes we think about resilience as being this beautiful blooming flower. And in caregiving in particular, we talk about thriving. We want everyone to thrive. And it's true, we do want everyone to thrive. And there are times in our lives where we're not going to be the beautiful flower. There's times in our lives where we just can't bloom in this moment, and that's okay. Sometimes it's enough just to be the leaves. Sometimes maintaining those leaves so that the flower can come later can be really helpful. We don't have to bloom at all times. We can just seek to have a status quo and grow and be the leaves. And sometimes we can't even be the leaves. Sometimes we really just have to focus on creating fertile soil and keeping those little seedlings alive, so that we can grow leaves and bloom later. And so when I think about resilience and thriving, it's not about being the flower now necessarily. It's about making the space so that we can flower later. It's creating fertile soil. It's sowing the seeds. It's nourishing the seeds so that even if we can't bloom right now, even if we're stuck in the mud right in the moment, we are doing what we need to do in order to be able to bloom and thrive later. And so that's where we get into the idea of arts and creative expression, because I think there's a lot of things that we can do to help nourish that soil. And my experience has been that art and creative expression can be one of the things to help nourish the soil, to keep those little seedlings alive so that later, when we're not stuck in the mud anymore, we can bloom. Or maybe we can even bloom while we're stuck in the mud, which would be even better. There's all kinds of things that count as art and creative expression. And I've got a bunch listed here. Things like performance, playing music, dancing, even if you're just dancing around your kitchen, doing theater, singing, doing film, visual arts like drawing or painting or photography or sculpture, crafts, things like knitting or crocheting, embroidery, quilting, even baking, literature, writing prose or poetry, digital arts like doing animations or computer graphics, or either doing those things or also engaging in all of those things. So reading what someone else has written, reading someone else's prose or poetry, going to the theater, going to museums or galleries or performances or concerts. All of that fits under this umbrella of creative expression. So it's really it's not just, oh, I wrote a book. It is all a wide range of things. And I want to name that we don't have to be good at these things in order to do them and benefit from them. So we can draw or we can paint, and we might not consider ourselves objectively good at it. And it can still be fulfilling and it can still help us to create that fertile soil. So when we think about how arts activities are linked with our well-being, there's a bunch of different ways that we can connect this through. So some of it is just beauty. Aesthetic engagement is like the beauty that's around us. Looking at beautiful art, making art even if it's not super beautiful, all of that can connect us. It uses our imagination, it uses our sensory activation. So when we use our hands, when we sing and we use our lungs, when we use our ears, our eyes, all of that helps connect us into things that help our well-being. It can help us feel our big emotions. It can evoke emotions in us, help us process those emotions. It stimulates our brain. It creates a space for social interaction. Depending on the activity, it can be physical activity. I don't know if you've ever been baking and you really needed to mix something hard, or if you're kneading bread and you're really needing to really lean into it in order to knead that bread. There's physical activity involved in that. And that can be true for other arts engagement as well. Drumming is one that can be very physically engaging and also connect to a lot of senses and help in a lot of these other ways. It can help us engage with themes around health and well-being. So it can help us think about what well-being means in the context that we're thinking about it. And there are times when we actually are interacting in healthcare settings with these arts. I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot, but that's another way that we can connect the arts with health and well-being. And so then these components, we can think about the ways that they actually trigger these benefits in us. And there's a few different ways that we can talk about. One of them is the way that they impact our psychological well-being. They can have psychological impacts. One of the big ones on this list that I want to name is emotion regulation. And even just thinking about the way that we're feeling emotions related to caregiving or related to whatever happens to be going on in our lives. This is one that I think is important because my own experience has been that reading other people's works, looking at other people's art can help me notice the emotions that I'm experiencing, can help give words to the emotions that I'm experiencing in ways that I couldn't do before. And getting my own thoughts onto paper, getting my own, whether that's through drawing or whether that is through writing or using other ways of expression, can help me bring the feelings that I have on the inside and get them out in a way that helps them organize. There's also physiological responses that come with art. It can lower your hormone response. It can enhance your immune function. It can help your heart beat more efficiently and be more responsive to what you're experiencing. There's social components. It can help us feel less isolated. And that can be true just in general, but it can also be true when the art has a social component to it as well, where we're engaging with other people in these arts. And it can be behavioral. It can help us adopt new activities. It can help us with skills development. So these are all different ways that art can impact us. And when we look at the science around art, we see that there's actual measurable impacts of this. Arts engagement supports well-being. So this is some research done by a group called the Epi Arts Lab, and they looked at large national surveys and they came up with some of these really impactful findings. For example, older adults who did creative hobbies at least monthly are 20% less likely to be depressed than people who don't do those hobbies. Baking or cooking is associated with 30% lower odds of depression 2 years later. So measurable impact, measurable associations with things like depressed mood. Participating in community art groups was associated with enhanced positive affect, which is like good emotions, life satisfaction, purpose in life, and perceived mastery. That's feeling like you know what you're doing. So connecting community art groups with these positive impacts. For health behaviors, for older adults, things like social, cultural, and community engagement, things like arts and crafts, were associated with shorter inpatient stays and shorter hospital stays when they had health problems. So impacting the way that we interact with the medical system. And for older adults, doing 1 to 3 hours of arts activities per week was associated with lower cognitive decline. So better keeping our brains healthy as we are aging, which is consistent with the impact or the association that having an hour of exercise per week gave. So knowing that in the general population, and I know these mostly focus on older adults, but expanding that to the general population in general, arts engagement is associated with these positive benefits in mental health, well-being, health behavior, healthy aging, and lots of other areas. We see that in the science. So when we think about this specific to caregiving, there is some evidence in caregivers that that arts interventions and just doing art in general can be helpful. We can think about this in a few different ways. As the person doing the art or doing the creative expression, whatever that happens to be, that's associated with reduced burden. It's associated with better self-acceptance, better self-awareness, better empathy, and this ability to release strong emotions. Doing the art helped get the strong emotions out. It was associated with a positive sense of personal identity and self-efficacy. So like an I can do this attitude. I know what I'm doing. It was associated with relaxation, a flow state, which is like I'm in the moment, well-being, and also reduced depression and anxiety. And different activities can have different impacts. So I'm going to give a personal example here to help just ground this and to help think about what this might look like for you. So for me, in my most recent caregiving role, I did a lot of knitting. A lot of knitting. And that was because I was in waiting rooms a lot, but also because I was worried a lot. And knitting helped keep my hands busy. It was really soothing. It gave me that flow state, and it helped give me something to do while I was in waiting rooms and while I was stressed. I don't know that I got a lot of that psychological impact from knitting. I think it's possible that there were physiological impacts where my stress levels were lower because I had this ongoing practice that I could do with my hands because it helped control the swirly thoughts in my brain. But I didn't necessarily have a lot of that getting the ick out and that catharsis that came with knitting. However, picking up a writing practice where someone else would give me a writing prompt and I would just free write for 15 minutes really did have that more catharsis effect where I was able to take all the ick, all the swirly ick that was on the inside and get it out onto paper, which gave me a chance to organize it in a better way and kind of get that Rubik's Cube pieces into place so that I could think about it differently, so that I could say, wow, I'm really stressed about this one thing that I hadn't thought about, or I'm having some really big emotions about this, and getting them on the paper just helps lay them out so I can look at them, so I can manipulate, so that I can manage them, so that I can think about how to deal with them going forward. So that's just two examples for me. And there's a lot of other ways you can think about this. Not all activities are going to have the same impact. And that's okay. And which activities you pick and which impacts they have, that's personal. That's up to you. You can decide, I want to do the thing that just keeps my brain from swirling out of control versus I want to do the thing that really gets all the icky feelings on the inside and puts them somewhere on the outside so that I can deal with them. We can also think about the way that art and creative expression can impact the person who's viewing the art or experiencing the art or reading the works, whatever it happens to be. So the audience. Some of this is related to having a common sense of humanity. So when I see that someone else is putting together words or images or songs or whatever that connect with me, I feel connected with that person. I realize that I'm not alone, and that common humanity can be really impactful. Feeling seen is a huge thing. One of the examples that I found when I was thinking about this talk was the TV show This Is Us. I haven't seen that show. I'm not familiar with it, but there was a whole report about a caregiving storyline in This Is Us and how that impacted the audience and what their perceptions were on this. And the take-home point from it was that it helped people to feel seen. People pointed at that and said, that is what it's like. And that made them feel connected. It made them feel appreciated. It made them feel acknowledged. And that can be really impactful. And I mentioned catharsis, or the releasing of strong emotions, earlier when we talk about the way it can impact us as the artist. But as a viewer or a reader or an observer or an audience member, that can also help us have catharsis. I know that in my most recent caregiving experience, reading other people's writing, whether it was about caregiving or just about stuff in general, really helped me to sort through my emotions and feel some release from that in ways that I couldn't necessarily do on my own. So being the viewer is also impactful. And I'm going to give an example of this. So this is a poem by Sharon Marsh from Leave Her Wild. I think I came across this on social media somewhere. I think Sharon Marsh is very active in social media. And this was one of the things that when I was going through my caregiving experience really gave words to something that I was feeling but didn't know how to deal with, and gave me permission to rest when I didn't feel like I could rest. So I'm going to read this for you. It's a poem called Monarch Butterflies Will Not Attempt to Fly in the Rain, because the raindrops will damage their delicate wings. They will rest and wait it out. It's self-preservation. It's okay to rest during the storms in your life. Take all the time you need. You will fly again once the storm passes. And for me, this is helpful because sometimes I forget that it's okay to rest. I want to strive, I want to do, I want to go, go, go. And when we're in the mud with caregiving, sometimes we can't do that. Sometimes it's not reasonable to do that. And so being told, given explicit permission through beautiful poetry that it's okay to rest can help me as the reader. The last one I want to comment on is the potential impact on others. So things like decision makers, things like healthcare providers, things like policymakers. For one thing, art around caregiving can help enhance understanding of the complexity of ill health. So when policymakers or decision makers or healthcare providers see these experience these various creative expressions around caregiving, it can help them understand better what the experience is. They can understand how complex it is. They can understand that it's not just the big things that drive us crazy, it's the small things too. And that can help them provide better care. It can help us make better decisions, and it can help put better policies in place. It changes the conversation. It also can help increase awareness of what support may be needed, because it's one thing to survey people and have them say, okay, I need help here, 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 and here, but you might not be capturing something that's important because you didn't ask about it. And these artistic expressions can change the way that we think about what's needed by bringing to the surface the stuff that's important enough to make art about. So that brings us to our last segment here, which is the Caregiving Postcard Project. And this is a project that is, as I said earlier, ongoing right now with the goals of helping to bring caregiving to greater awareness and help impact all of those people, help us as artists or commenters, help other people as viewers, and also help policymakers or community leaders to change the conversation around caregiving in order to have an impact. And so it really came from a few different ideas that are all knitted together. The first one is that it's very clear that there's not a lot of awareness about caregiving. 1 in 5 people are caregivers. And I bet you can't name 1 in 5 people in your circle who are in caregiving roles, because we don't talk about it very much. And so there's a need to talk about it more. There's a need to raise this awareness. There's a need to have caregiving show up in shows like This Is Us more. And so that's part of what is driving this project, is how can we raise awareness about caregiving in a way that's impactful? Second, the moments that drive us crazy as caregivers are not necessarily the ones that researchers or policymakers ask about. So I mentioned earlier, when we do a survey, we ask about the stuff that maybe seems like it's going to be important, but we're not always capturing the stuff that's really important for caregivers or for patients. And so thinking about how we can capture that stuff better, capture what's happening in the moment that we maybe wouldn't even think about mentioning later, that is really either giving us joy, giving us life, or is driving us completely crazy. The last one here is that awareness of the power of art to convey situations in a new way. And that touches on all of the things that I just talked about, the way that it impacts us, the way that it impacts other people, and the way that it impacts the decision makers who may have a hand in helping create policy or create the environment in our communities that helps caregivers. So it kind of comes down to this. Art is not what you see, but what you make others see. And in that vein, we wondered what would happen if we gave caregivers postcards, literal postcards, physical postcards. I'll show you an image of those in a minute, that they could fill out either with words or with pictures when they felt overcome with joy or frustration, so that they could give words to what they were experiencing or give images to what they were experiencing, and then fuse them all together into an art project or a display that tells the story of caregiving for others to see and to impact policymakers. So it pulls on this idea of public art. I would say that this project is not public art specifically because it's people contributing what their experiences are, and then me and my colleagues are the ones who are putting it together in art. So it's not strictly public art, but it does have some of the goals of public art. It inspires conversations. It allows for collective expressions. It helps cultivate shared meaning, and it's at least partially a group process where we're doing this together. So here's what the postcard looks like. It's literally a postcard. On the front, we've got some information about caregiving, a word bubble about caregiving, a word cloud, I should say, about caregiving. And on the back, it just prompts people to fill this postcard out when they're overflowing with joy or frustration or gratitude, so that we can collect these things and put them into a public art project that can help build this awareness. There's a few different ways we're doing this. One is those actual postcards, those actual physical postcards that people can mail in. Another one is an online survey that people can fill out. The survey doesn't have anything except for tell us what you want to tell us about caregiving. So it doesn't collect any information. It's all anonymous. The postcards are all anonymous, but that's to help with people who don't have postcards or don't want to mail a postcard in to also have a voice and be able to contribute. The other thing we're doing is going to various community organizations and hosting meetings with caregivers to talk about their caregiving experience, basically using these postcards as a jumping off point to have conversations around what those joys and challenges of caregiving are, and giving people an opportunity, if they want, to put information on those postcards or on other worksheets to share if that's what they'd like to do as part of that conversation. We have three really core objectives here, and they're all intertwined. The first one is to lift up the voices of caregivers. Caregivers take on a lot, and what that's like varies from person to person, but those voices have meaning. Those voices have impact. And so lifting up the voices of caregivers is really the first thing that we want to do here. We want to bring those voices to the forefront and have caregivers able to give a say to what they're experiencing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We also want to raise awareness about the caregiving experience because, as I said before, we don't talk about it a lot. People go around being caregivers and they never mention it to anyone, even when it's a really hard time. And that's okay. That's a personal choice. People can talk about it or not talk about it, depending on what they want to. But if people aren't talking about it because it's just something that's not done, I don't think that's necessary. So I think raising awareness and creating space to have these conversations can help all of us. And then the last objective here is to inspire conversations about the needs and supports for caregivers. So when we put all of this together, when we hear about the joys and frustrations that caregivers are experiencing and they put them in their own words, how does that help us think about the way we can support caregivers, about what the needs of caregivers are? Us, meaning the general public, everyone, but also those policymakers, those community leaders, those decision makers. How can we use this as a way to help them think better about what caregivers need and what the experience is really like? So next, I just want to give you a couple of examples of what we're seeing from caregivers. And I will say it was hard to pick which examples to include because so much of what we're getting is truly beautiful. And because of the short space that we give people, because it's just a postcard sized space, a lot of it, even when it's just individual sentences, it feels like poetry because people are fitting so much into such a small space. So here's one example. I'm going to read the words on this postcard. So the image is of a postcard that has been filled out, again, totally anonymous. And I'm going to read the words. I know penmanship can sometimes be difficult, especially on a screen like this. So I'll read the text for you. It says, gratitude for happy times spent with loved one. Fears, anxiety of fights and all that's involved in end of life. Selfish for worrying about myself after loved one gone, and where to go with no job experiences or income. Joy of the positive memories. So I love this one because it captures so much that complexity around care roles and the way that there's so many emotions wrapped up to it, both good and bad, all at the same time. We're also getting art from caregivers, which is one of our goals. We want to see art from caregivers. We want to see how caregivers portray their experience, not just in words, but also in many of the other ways that they can express themselves. So this is a picture of another submission that we got, which is a collage. It is a teacup picture, a printed image of a teacup, black and white, like a coloring book page. And on it is pasted many different words and phrases pulled out from magazines and maybe from newspapers that emphasize what this particular person experienced. Talking about hope and faith and having brilliant ideas and grief and medication and plans and courage, all of the different things that come together to create that experience for caregivers. So as we are collecting these, we are also in the process of creating a public art display. This is what I call phase one, because it's not the end of what we're doing, but it is the starting point. So this public art display that we are in the works of creating right now is called In Care Of, Postcard-Sized Portrayals of Caregiving in Wisconsin. In this display, we're taking these postcards and we're curating them, which means that we're figuring out how to arrange them and connect them with other objects, actual things that we can look at that tell the story of the joys and challenges of caregiving. So, for example, pairing some of the postcards that we got that talk about meditation and balance with those cairns of rocks, stacked rocks that sort of demonstrate what we mean by balance, and putting those together in a display that helps us think about the themes that we're seeing, that helps us think about both those joys and challenges simultaneously. So that's going to be displayed in Madison at the UW-Madison campus in the School of Human Ecology, starting April 30th and going through November 7th. And some of you who are involved with caregiving know that November is Family Caregiving Month. So we intentionally extended it into November so that we can have a chance to talk about this display in the context of Family Caregiving Month. If you happen to be in Madison during this time frame, we would love to have you come visit the display at the School of Human Ecology. And the link here, I will put the link in the chat when I'm done talking and when I stop sharing my screen, is for the event itself. It gives some information about what the In Care Of display is and just has that information about when it's going to be displayed and where you can find it. There will also be a web presence for this, so you'll be able to see some of these images online as well. But that's not the end of it. That's just the starting point. And in the future, we have a few things that we are hoping that we'll be able to do with this. The first is a website that's going to curate and catalog these postcard responses. We can't put all of them into the actual public art display, but we can put all of them on the website. And there's so many beautiful responses. I'm hoping to find a way that we can demonstrate those and have those as a resource for people to look at and either contribute their own to have that impact on themselves of engaging in some art and creative expression, but also to see what other people are saying and have that sense of connection with other people experiencing similar things and putting into words or putting into images something that maybe we haven't been able to express ourselves. We also plan to do some awareness raising webinars and presentations. So bringing what we see in these postcards and bringing it around so that we can connect with communities throughout Wisconsin in order to talk about these things and have those conversations and make it so that when there's 1 in 5 people who are caregivers, we know more about that. We talk more about that. I'm also hoping to be able to do a traveling display throughout Wisconsin. We're putting this initial display together in such a way that it's just a lot of framed works so that we can then take it and bring it around and hang it on walls or put it in display cases at libraries or at community centers or in other places throughout the state so that other people can experience this in real time and look at these actual postcards as well instead of just online. So as I've mentioned about 7 times already, this is ongoing right now. So if you're a caregiver and you would like to participate, you can do that even if you don't have a postcard. First, you can send a postcard to us, and I will put the address for that in the chat as well. You can send any postcard to us. You can send a letter to us, whatever you want to do. That we are perfectly open to that. It doesn't have to be our postcards in particular. And if that's not something you want to do, but you want to participate, you can participate online. So you can scan this QR code, or you can go to this highlighted website. Again, this will go in the chat when we're done, in order to be involved and give us your own submission for what the joys and challenges of caregiving have been for you and how that might manifest in your day-to-day. So what I want to close on is with an invitation. I just spent a bunch of your time talking about the way that I think art can help people in general and help caregivers in specific. And so my closing invitation is for you to think about how this might impact your own life. On the screen here are, again, the list of examples of different arts and creative expression. This is not all of them. You can think of some other ones. Anything that fits into arts and creative expression certainly works for me. But my invitation to you is to pick one of these things, whether it's something that you already do on a regular basis, or whether it's something that you want to try for the first time, and just do it. And as you're doing it, think about the way that it's impacting you. Think about, is it helping you feel that sense of flow? Is it helping you connect with the present moment? Is it helping you get ick on the inside and put it on the outside? Is it helping you feel a sense of expansive joy? How is it impacting you? And bring that then into your coping strategies and the way that you deal with the world. Because all of these different ways of creative expression can help you grow and learn, can help us all grow and learn as individuals, and can help us in various ways. And so I encourage you to experiment with that and see what works for you, and see if it's part of the way that you are going to cope with hard things going forward. With that, I will end. I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and put some of these links into the chat that I mentioned, and open it for questions and conversation.